coming to our first Tough Talk of the season. This one's actually going to be centered around gun violence. So I'm Natalie. I'm the Director of Campus Unity for SGA.
I'm Ryan.
Hi, I'm Imaya. I am the current president of a new organization by the name of Middle Grass.
So basically this Tough Talk is going to have 3 sections. One discussing the Oregon District tragedy, another talking about the mental health effects that are tied to gun violence, and then the final one discussing how we will move forward in regard to campus safety initiatives and involvement. As it states on the slide here, a group of moderators will ask questions directed at specific panel members. However, please do not hesitate to interject and ask your own questions. We actually encourage that. It'll just make the night flow and it'll help you to get the most out of this Tough Talk. So, gun violence can be a very difficult and potentially emotional topic to talk about. So we've kind of laid out some ground rules for you guys and for us just to make sure that everything runs smoothly. So first of all, please treat everyone with respect, whether it be those who are graciously giving our time on the panel or just your peers in the room. Their views might not be the same as yours, and please just remember that and respect it. And second, please listen to understand. As I just said, their views might be different than yours, and just kind of try to understand where they're coming from. And also, please speak only for ourselves. Don't try to speak for other people or any of the groups that you're initiated with. And furthermore, any people who are members of other campus organizations, their views are not associated with the clubs that they're in, the groups that they're in, or the University of Dayton. It's solely their own views. Also, explore disagreement and be open to new ideas.
Okay, so as many of you know, on August 4th, a mass shooting occurred in the Oregon District, not even 10 minutes from campus. Within a number of seconds, multiple people were killed and even more were injured. In light of tragedies such as this, many questions come to light. How does this affect people differently? What are policies that protect us? And what can we do? We hope that this panel, who have given their time to be here, will help in answering some of these questions and help us in working toward a greater understanding of each other's feelings and positions. We have a number of panelists tonight who agreed to be here to share some knowledge about these tough questions. We have UD Police Chief Chatman, thank you. Dean of Students, Schramm. Director of the Counseling Center, Dr. Chantelle, Pseekos. And a Dayton Police Lieutenant, Randy Beane, who has something right before this, so he might come in late. Yeah. On the tables in front of you, we have some copies of the University of Dayton magazine. The current issue shares some perspectives on the Oregon District tragedy, and we encourage you to read through the magazine and see what community members have to say. Now we'll move into questions for our panelists. The questions we're going to ask were generated by SGA from input from social media and interaction with people on campus. So one of our first panel questions is, if I can pull it up. Okay, so we'll start with the mental health effects. So the prevalence of gun violence has an impact on the way incidents are reported in the media and for many the way in which we process them, whether it's those directly impacted or further from the tragedy. Can you discuss those effects or impacts in greater detail?
Absolutely, thank you. Can everyone hear me in the back? I really am glad that you're taking your Sunday evening to be here with us today. One of the things that we tend to see is with post-traumatic stress, if you've already experienced some sort of a trauma, there can be a compounded effect. And I just want to speak a little bit to some of the things to be aware of during the upcoming weeks and months that could surface on the mental health side. So that would be things like feeling a little bit more detached out of your body, a little bit more jumpy than you normally would. when we're exposed to trauma, sometimes these things emerge for us. If we're susceptible for things like panic attacks, we can see them happen more frequently. You may also notice this among some of your peers as well, becoming a little bit more withdrawn. And there also can be kind of a numbing effect. We can become a bit desensitized to all of these tragedies that are happening to us. But for us to then take a step back and realize beneath the numb feelings, there's something more. So for us to be mindful of that within our community, I think is incredibly important. And I think if you're noticing any of these effects for you that are coming up, to be aware that the counseling center's here, and there are other resources available to you on campus as well. So for example, campus ministry, your folks in Res Life, being able to rely on multiple supports if you're noticing some of these symptoms emerging, I think is really important. The other piece I'll say, because I know we don't have someone here from the health center tonight, is that you may notice with some of these traumas, again, I talked a little bit about being more jumpy. When I say panic attack, what I mean may be something like you're unexpectedly crying and you don't know why. You're having thoughts of suicide and you're talking about them, but it's not you. It's not how you normally are. You're just kind of feeling a little bit zoned out. So these are signs to really be aware of. You're more hypervigilant to your surroundings, like where the doors are, where the exit doors are. So these are very common responses, but I just want to let you know as well, the health center is another supportive space that's available to you out there.
So we're actually going to have another mental health related question for you. So as the media often links gun violence and mental health together, how do you see this impacting college campuses like our own?
Absolutely. It's interesting on our side of things, what we often see is just what I was describing to you in the last part. This post-traumatic stress effect is really what we tend to see in the counseling center. What we rarely see are those who are the perpetrators of the violent offenses. That's more when people are mandated to do counseling, often not wanting to be there. And sometimes the myth is spread that mental illness is something to be sort of red flag, worried about as people who are somehow going to become violent. And I double checked the data on this before I came here. That really still remains a myth in this country. Very much not true. People who are suffering from the mental health concerns are really the survivors of the trauma, having more, for example, PTSD or other anxiety or depression related symptoms emerging. So what I think it means for our college campus community at UD and even beyond, nationally, internationally, is we want to be mindful of those around us. We know that being connected, being part of a community matters. So whether it's someone who's considering an act of violence or someone who just needs extra support, we really want to be good allies, good friends, good peers to one another. We want to say something if we see something, like for those of you who may have gone through the Green Dot training, to not be alone in that. So I think really dispelling myths and realizing that this reality that we're faced with these days. I'm actually a UD alum. I was class of 03. We weren't having these dialogues when I went to school here. This is something that's evolved over time, and it's really sad and unsettling for all of us. But just remembering, as we hear different messages from the media, it's really a public health crisis when we're thinking about the acts of violence, and when we're thinking about the mental health support, we're thinking about creating a community with each of us in this room of care for those who are affected and impacted by it in some way.
Okay, so I think we're going to move into, well, if anyone has a follow-up question, any of this. Okay, and we'll have time for some of this afterward. And then, so we're going to move into some campus safety initiatives and involvement. So to Dean Schramm and Chief Chatman, what campus policies and resources exist related to weapons and campus safety?
Hey, thanks for coming. Good evening, I'm Schramm. I am the Associate Vice President and the Dean of Students. So thanks so much for having me. You know, I think that Dr. Pseekos really brought up a really great point. That we weren't having these conversations in '03, and I was here, and I also was an Assistant Vice President at the time. But you were. So many, this is a reality that has been a part of your life, right? From Columbine to now, of course, as we talk about our local tragedy. But I can assure you we've always had a policy in place about weapons on campus, about assuring your safety and your security. It's always been there. But now it's so much more a part of our reality. It's so much more a part of our, in your face. We have it outlined in the handbook. We have it outlined. There's strategies over with in public safety about what we do with these. And although they're no different, it's so much more a part of your life, and that's where the change has been. So I do want to highlight, we've got a couple things in place here at the institution. One is, yes, we are supported by laws and statutes of what's in the federal and local government, that you are responsible and students are responsible to all the laws and statutes of what that means, from concealed and carry to not having a weapon on the property, etc. We also have our handbook. The handbook makes it really clear, and it says that anything that could be represented or presented as a threat, that is against our university code of conduct. We have a pretty robust reporting structure that we absolutely need you to take advantage of. Students are our best ears and eyes on a university campus. Sure, faculty let us know when they see some things concerning. Sure, staff lets us know, but you are our ears and eyes for 24 hours, 7 days a week. And we do need you to be, to use any mechanism that you can, from calling public safety to seeing on every webpage there's a reporting mechanism to let us know if something is concerning. And from there, we take every report seriously. And it will be investigated in different variations. And I use investigation with a lowercase I. That might be a phone call to that person. It might be a phone call to seeing what's going on in the classroom. It might be finding out what happens on their floors. Because what we know is true, that these incidents it's just not a one and done thing, right? That we know that there's a connection of behaviors that we're going to be able to, based on your report, be able to check out if there's something we need to know. And how do we follow up with that?
Thank you. I think as it relates to campus safety and what our approach has been since the Oregon District, if you think of the acronym VET, V-E-T, it's a three-pronged approach that we've taken. V stands for visibility. We have very intentionally, deliberately, in every other word that comes to mind, tried to put officers in your space, in your face, and be present. We know that there can be mixed feelings about what has occurred at the Oregon District because it was close, but we don't just focus on that. We just know that the whole issue of violence and incivility to one another can have people feeling anxious. And so part of our approach was higher visibility. We have hoped that you have seen more officers walking, more officers on bicycles, more officers engaged in tabling events and things around campus, just to give a sense of security to you, but also we want them to be present for you in case you have any questions or concerns. The E is engagement. We have a series of new initiatives. I think Brian and SGA talked about ACOPS prior to this particular forum. But we are looking for your ideas on ways in which you can engage with us and we can engage with you. Data tells us that is what keeps communities safer. It keeps communities safer because when you know a police officer, and the police officers know you, you are more likely, when you see something suspicious, you're more likely to pick up the phone and say, hey, I don't know if this means anything to you or not, but I wanted to report this suspicious behavior, this suspicious car, this whatever else. And it gives police officers an opportunity to respond more in the moment. It gives you a sense of comfort in knowing that we are truly there to be partners of yours. And we can deal with some issues and apprehend people or ask the appropriate questions just depending on what the circumstance is. And then the T is training. Unfortunately, there has been, but it makes sense, there's been a significant rise in demand for us to do active shooter trainings. And we don't mind that. You can't ask us enough. You can't demand it enough. You can't come up with a time that's inconvenient for us. If it's most convenient for you to have the training at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday night or Tuesday morning, we will be there. We believe that an informed community helps keep the entire community safe. And so please look for the trainings that we offer on active shooter and any other areas related to safety. This is not a selfish plug to follow me on Instagram. Yeah, it kind of helps. It's not a selfish plug, but on Twitter and Instagram is the same handle, hashtag, whatever it's called, UD Chief Chatman. But we put, or I put out all of those trainings, including our police academies and everything else, via that method. And so I really want you to follow just to get the safety related trainings that we offer and the opportunities to engage with us.
So as Ryan previously mentioned, the magazines at the center of all of your tables actually pertain to the Oregon tragedy, which moves us into our next topic of discussion. So Lieutenant, this question's for you. What does your experience with the Oregon tragedy entail, and how does it affect you, or did affect you, your colleagues, and those around you?
My name is Lieutenant Randy Beane. I was the incident commander for the shooting. Basically means I was just the highest ranking officer there at the time. With shootings, we go on shootings all the time. Officers become desensitized to violence because it's something we deal with on a pretty much daily basis. So we learn to deal with it in different ways, you know, dark humor, that type of thing. But this shooting was different. And that's one of the things, like, I came home that morning and I told my wife, like, she was asking why I was so upset about it. I said, well, I don't know why. I said, it's just different. Maybe it's different because, you know, I've never seen 30-some people shot before. You know, I've gone on shootings, I've seen 5 people shot before. I've never seen 30-some. So it was just a totally different situation. The carnage and everything, the amount of blood, it really was a difficult scene to deal with. And I think that's where some of our officers are struggling, because a lot of them were pretty much brand new officers. This was some of the, for a few of them, it was the first shooting they'd ever been on. And they were doing CPR on people for 10, 15 minutes that ended up dying. So for them, it can be pretty rough, because they haven't built up some of those coping skills yet to deal with incidents. And I know we have senior officers who were there. It bothered them. It bothered me. And so all of us were still trying to deal with it and go about our day-to-day business. There's still other calls to go on, other shootings. I mean, we have to deal with it, and it's been rough for some people. And one of the things we've just been looking out for each other, because just mental health right now in the police field is a hot topic with police suicides and all that. So we're just making sure that we're taking care of our officers. We're making sure they're going to peer support groups. We have a clinical psychologist that pretty much every single one of us has had to sit down and go talk to. So the department has really done a lot for our officers, but it's going to take a long time for some of them to heal.
Thank you so much. I think that's something we can all take a little bit of advice from. Now to the whole panel, what is the impact that this tragedy and incidents of gun violence more broadly have on the impact on you and the way that you approach your work?
I'll start, and just to re-emphasize the things that Lieutenant Beane was talking about. And I mentioned it in the article that's in the magazine on your tables. I too am very concerned about the cumulative impact on officers and what we see. As difficult as that scene was, I was also down there as well. and some of our officers were down there as well as first responders. As difficult as that was, as Lieutenant was talking about suicide, there is a cumulative impact on all that you see. And I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but Lieutenant was late getting here because he was at another shooting scene prior to coming here. And day after day after day after day of seeing the incivility that people have and do to one another, it has an impact on you. And I'll share a personal story. After a difficult scene that I was on a few years ago, I came home and heard my wife talking to her father on the phone, and she was saying, well, I think he's starting to sleep throughout the night, and I think his appetite is back. And I thought she was talking about one of our rescue dogs. But I soon realized she was talking about me, and I didn't even realize I had physical manifestations of the work, and that was pre-Oregon. This was just day-to-day to day-to-day type stuff. And so how it impacts what I do now is I'm very and acutely aware of our officers' mental health. I'm very proud to hear what Dayton is doing for its officers. We do some similar things for our officers. We make it mandatory that they go through the Ohio Crisis Response Team after an event like this. And we do constantly check on one another. And sometimes it's just pulling somebody to the side and just saying, hey brother, are you okay? Sister girl, are you all right? And just checking in and giving them space to be open about what they're truly feeling. But I think that's the change that I've noticed in my career over a very short period of time. When I started in police work, it was solely the dark humor and a couple of shots of whiskey, and you moved on. You didn't talk about the nightmares. You didn't talk about the ill feelings. You didn't talk about the flashbacks of what you saw. And so now the profession has changed, and it's high time that it has. And so I think that's the biggest change for us.
I just really appreciate the authenticity and honesty and courage for people to speak openly up on this stage, and I think it models it for all of us. One thing that brought me back to the University of Dayton was knowing the sense of community and wanting to be there for one another and really care for one another. And one thing we know with whether it's post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, any sort of anxiety condition, being able to tell your story and not being alone in it, whether it's to your journal, whether it's to your best friend, whether it's to your romantic partner, whether it's to this audience, whether it's privately to me or one of my colleagues when we wrap up today, is so critical. Because when we lose that sense of personal control in our life and we feel disempowered, one of the key parts of treatment, whether you're officially seeking it through counseling or another method, is to get those things back. So when I do trauma work with clients, it's really about how do we regain that sense of control, community, empowerment, and being able to tell your story openly. So the flashbacks can instead take a different form and be able to be a narrative that you share with others of strength, how we build resilience, how we move through it. So I think I'm personally affected in terms of I'm coming from Rhode Island most recently, was back and forth between Rhode Island and Cincinnati, and my immediate thought when I heard the news was, how's the UD community? How's everybody doing? How's everyone affected? So based on the number of folks here tonight, I'm very pleased to be back in this environment, and I think we just need to support each other. I think that's really critical.
So I think for me, there are two things that it has impacted in the work I did. One, it's real. This is a real thing. You know, I said, we've had this in our policy all the time, right? If somebody comes, they got a weapon, we're gonna have to respond. But it was present, but now we live in it. And that is a pretty heavy weight on the shoulders. Because now it's not just somebody identifying that there might be or there's somebody saying, gosh, this might be a problem, or we are concerned about somebody, it's now identifying it. Right? If there is a threat that walks among us, or if there is a situation that you might have been dealing with because you had a situation in high school, it's so much more real for me. The second piece about that is how it has affected my job. I got into this business about 30 years ago. And a lot of it was, how are we helping students outside of the classroom? You got this roommate conflict over here, and you had a situation that you're dealing with your parents, they're going through a nasty divorce, and you're feeling down about it, and how can we help students remove the obstacles to a classroom? And now we're talking about the threat of a mass shooter. That's an accelerated trajectory of a career that I'm going into threat assessment trainings. I'm being trained by the FBI. I'm being trained by folks who deal with some really heavy stuff. And I got into this business to help you through your roommate conflict. What? But the work is still the same because it affects who you are, how you do your work, and who we are as a community. So it has changed greatly, but in some ways, it's who we are, and it's where you are at, which means that's where I'm at.
I'd say one thing that's changed is, even though it was a horrible situation, it's kind of given me hope, which is a weird thing. A lot of police officers become cynical because when we deal with people, it's probably not your best day. No one calls the police to say, hey, I had a great day, why don't you come hang out with me? When we get called, someone's been killed, someone's been beaten, you had your car stolen, you had an accident, people usually aren't happy to see us. So people a lot of times treat us poorly. And so a lot of times we become cynical, and that's something it affects a lot of officers. Well, with this, the community has been great. I mean, the outpouring of support for all the officers, like little things like dropping food off at the districts. I worked at like an 18-hour day one day, and I went home, slept for a couple hours, came back in, and there was like a case of Monster sitting there. And it was like, I'm like, that's exactly what I needed. I needed a Monster. And it was great that someone, I don't know, that someone must have had a family in law enforcement, because that's what we live off of, our energy drinks. I know they're horrible for us, but it's, but it was something that, as small as that, just made my day. People coming up and saying thank you. We even had some dope dealer say thank you to us, which was funny, because any other day of the year he'd want to kill us, but then he's telling us thank you. So it's, the community has been great with this, and so that was just the one thing. It's kind of strange, and all of us are sitting there like we're kind of soaking it up right now because everyone likes us. Even when we go on call now, people like us, and it's just a nice change of pace.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lieutenant, and the rest of our panelists. Can we give them another round of applause for taking their time out of their day to be here and for sharing their thoughts with us? Thank you so much again. So we're going to move into our table discussion. Just to introduce myself again, my name is Umaya. I'm the current president for Middle Ground. Middle Ground is a new organization. This is our first semester starting up. So to give you a little bit of background, Middle Ground is actually a dialogue-based organization. It's inspired from the YouTube show Middle Ground on YouTube, started by Jubilee Media. So my main reason for starting this organization is really the fact that a lot of times, especially in online media, we see a lot of the extreme viewpoints from any topic, either for something or for against. And from the video itself, if you have seen the show, you'll see that a lot of people, a lot of the times the videos discuss really hard to talk about topics, but it's such a civilized discussion, and it makes room for hearing everybody's opinions. And so we want to introduce something like that here today. So I'll let Elise lead that in just a minute here. But again, to reinforce the community guidelines that we talked about before, make sure, again, that we're respecting each other's space, that we are listening to everybody, that all of our opinions are being heard, and make sure that your opinion is known. Thank you, guys.
So we're gonna get into table discussion, so you had a time to hear the panelists and listen to what they had to say, but now it's your time to talk on how you guys feel about the issues. So if you flip over the forms you have in the center of your table, some of the questions vary per table. Take a moment, read them. Now decide if you agree or disagree with the statement. And if you agree with the statement, place your hand on the table so your team knows who agrees with it. Oh yeah, discuss one question at a time. Okay, so can I quickly interject? Once you decide who agrees on the statement, I'll give you 2 minutes to discuss the agreeers, why you agree with it. Once you guys are done talking, I will say when the disagreeers will talk, why they disagree, and then you guys can come to a conversation between both of you guys. Okay? So agreeers can talk now.